Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Sometimes in life, the miracles and the joy, you have to capitalize because it may only exist for a moment. But as we sit here on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. before the evening games wrap up, based on points percentage, the Detroit Red Wings are in a playoff spot.
Stop the count. You know the drill. We're getting close to like February. We have hope again. I know it's not been the exact same as last season, but we are running dangerously close to last season's storyline. Like, things look bleak. They pick it up, and then, a big moment's going to happen in February, and Brad's going to look into the camera and say, I think this team's making the playoffs, but
no, I'm not going to say that again.
We've been hurt before, but 7 straight wins. I really thought me coming back from vacation would lead to this team's good fortune going away, and then I'd get yelled at, as would be deserved. But 7 straight wins is unreal. And it was right off the hop today against Seattle.
Longest winning streak since 2012.
That predates us.
That's wow.
In the history of this podcast, we have never got to enjoy a 7-game winning streak before today.
Let's enjoy it now before it goes away. Folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be recapping wins 6 and 7, Detroit's games against Chicago and Seattle. Massive performances from too many Red Wings to even list out right now, but really important storylines coming out of those games, even outside of just, the wins themselves. And then we're going to take a look at the mid-season mark, where Detroit is actually at in the wildcard race and what is projected for them moving forward. And then we're going to have a conversation based on 2 players in specific. We're going to talk about the Red Wings as a whole, but 2 players in specific to see if Todd McLellan has actually unlocked them and what that would mean for the Red Wings. We have updates on the Buffalo trade rumors between Detroit and the Sabres, looking at Dylan Cozens, NHL news, and more before overtime. Before all that, 2 things very quickly. There are like 9 tickets, I think, remaining to Winged Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins. GriffinsHockey.com/WWP to get your tickets and get an opportunity to grab one of those sweet Winged Wheel Podcast and Grand Rapids Griffins co-branded beanie. In addition to that, you also get the game ticket and a pregame live recording of the Winged Wheel Podcast featuring Dan Watson, head coach of the Grand Rapids Griffins, as well as Amadeus Lombardi. Secondly, if you want one of these Play Effin' Hockey shirts, which I'm wearing right now, go to wingedwheelpodcast.com/shop or wingedwheelpodcast.com/PFH. I'll put the links in the description. These shirts have sold fast. We've had to restock them a few times. They look sweet. They're amazing. Pumped to see them out at the LCA. Get your PFH, Play Effin' Hockey Winged Wheel Podcast merch today. The Red Wings are on a 7-game win streak, the longest in 13 years. We didn't think the vibes could come back to this degree, even though we said there's going to be a new coach bump. Even though we knew the schedule was a little bit soft, no one would have said 7 straight wins. But man, the Red Wings are doing it, and it has been electric. Just unbelievable. You can hardly keep up watching the game. It's goal after goal after goal.
Vibes are at a near literal all-time high for the regular season. I know you always have the jokes about me and being Rain Man with hockey stats. While you were reading your intro, one came to mind that I remembered reading a long time ago, but I had to double check it. And while you were reading, I checked. The longest winning streak in Red Wings franchise history is 9 games. And they're at 7.
If this season's Detroit Red Wings are the ones to do it, nothing makes sense in this simulation anymore.
Hey, weirder things have happened. We were talking about the unsustainable between Columbus and Minnesota, where they both had like 14-game winning streaks at the same time.
Which, again, talk about Rain Man. Like, how do you remember that stuff? Such a weird.
The Columbus Blue Jackets and Minnesota Wild played each other, riding simultaneous 14-game win streaks. How does anybody who watched hockey that year not remember that?
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's jump right into the games. The Red Wings' first win of the two since the last time we spoke was a win over the Chicago Blackhawks, which you always love to see. And this was a game where Detroit was playing a bottom feeder of the league who has been struggling, and they handled it just like that. It was a 5-3 win over Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks, and Detroit outshot them like 28-15. Like it wasn't particularly close. Even though it was 5-3, that kind of came after a 4-1 lead as well. And Detroit had a lot to celebrate that game.
It's a theme because we're going to talk about it with the Seattle game as well. It's one thing to beat a bad team. And don't get me wrong, Chicago and Seattle are awful this year. But in years past, the Red Wings did beat a lot of bad teams. They also lost to a lot of bad teams. The thing that felt different about these games wasn't just that they beat them. They looked like they were playing two different sports, which how many times have we seen that happen to Detroit, where they get up against the upper tier of the league and it's just comical how much worse Detroit was. I was watching Chicago and Seattle and thought in my head was, it's comical, the gap between these two teams right now. Again, are the Red Wings going to play at that level the whole season? No, but what was it? Early in the third period, Chicago had 8 shots on net. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. Detroit opened the game with a Alex DeBrincat goal from Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane breaking in, feeding Alex DeBrincat. And this whole game, Patrick Kane, like this guy loves playing the Chicago Blackhawks. Kane has really turned it on since the end of last calendar year, even just before Lalonde got fired. But under Todd McLellan, he has absolutely come to form. And I think some part of that also is him kind of shaking off the rust. We talk a lot about guys who are older in this league and who have gone through procedures like Kane. Like it's going to take them longer to get ramped up to game speed. You don't really call it out that often if you're the player, but if you're older, you're also conserving energy. It's an 82 game season. You want to play for the playoffs. He is skating now better than we've seen him skate really since he's been on the Red Wings. In this game, he was like burning guys around the outside. I was like, what year is this Patrick Kane?
It was insane. I was wondering if he turned back the clock because I have not seen Patrick Kane do that in 5 years, probably.
A mixture of whatever kind of black magic he has and wanting to score against the Blackhawks came this game. And he fed Alex DeBrincat for the opening goal. Alex DeBrincat, and I want to talk about him more later, continuing to thrive. He's just been a steady force all season. That was his 18th of the season. Lucas Raymond on the power play in the second period for Detroit to regain the lead. That was a nice play also from DeBrincat and Kane again, those two combining on that goal. And then Andrew Kopp scores on Erik Gustafsson's great play. Kane had a nice setup before to Gustafsson, and then Gustafsson makes a move, stepping in with the confidence of a player who we didn't think existed on the Red Wings since they signed Erik Gustafsson, fed Kopp in front, and Kopp fires that in. And everyone was just like, this is like all of the storylines we thought we might get in October, November, December are all happening at once right now.
You know things are running hot when Erik Gustafsson's popping off and not just getting other guys' goals. Andrew Kopp.
And Gustafsson scoring himself too.
Yeah, well, one against Columbus and then another against Seattle. He's on a downright heater right now. And I'm not even joking when I say that.
Yeah, no, for him,
well,
yeah,
the next
absolutely.
goal is the most indicative of a run hot.
Albert Johansson, first career NHL goal, fed by Lucas Raymond. Great backhand pass across the front of the net. Larkin was lifting someone's stick. It found Johansson perfectly, who had the confidence to break in. And talk about another player who has the confidence and has been emerging. Yeah, you're right, Evan. Like when those are the things that are happening for the Red Wings, Mickey says it on the broadcast all the time. When things are going good, that's the kind of play that happens. And what a feel-good game for Detroit overall. To cap it off, Marco Kasper gets a goal on the empty net to break a very, very, very long goal drought for him. He broke his point drought earlier in the game, and in all, Detroit ends up beating the Blackhawks 5-3. Was it a perfect win? No. The goaltending I don't think was there for Detroit, but it wasn't particularly close outside of that, and Detroit checked a lot of boxes that night.
Well, even on that Johansson goal, there's two things that happen on that play that don't happen unless a team's running high with confidence. Lucas Raymond attempted a cross-ice backhand pass through traffic. You're not doing that when vibes are low, when confidence is down, because you're just in your head, you know it's not getting through. And Johansson just crashing north because he thinks it's going to get through. And it all works out and it's beautiful.
And Johansson, who has the confidence to kind of step up into that zone, he would never have been there earlier this season. Gripping the stick too tight wouldn't even apply to him because he wasn't even in those positions. He was just, he was playing like a rookie defenseman would be expected to play, which is nervous. And to step off the line, to step into those plays is not something you see the guys have the confidence to do. And for a team like Detroit, who has had a bad start to the year, the fact that Todd McLellan has guys like Albert Johansson confident enough to step into those plays, that's not nothing. That's a goal. Yeah, it's his first career NHL goal, but it also signifies something a lot bigger too, which as a Red Wings fan, even if that came in a loss, like you love to see those plays. More on Kane and DeBrincat. Like, yes, Kane has turned it on and has been producing, and a lot of that, buoyed by his play and coming to form and the power play as well. Alex DeBrincat too. Like, we've not talked enough. He has come as advertised this season. We said if Alex DeBrincat is going to take a step, we just want him to be a little bit less streaky and show the way he can play more consistently. And through halfway of the season, he's in the conversation for one of the best Red Wings of the year. Like, even when the team was doing extremely poorly, I felt like Alex DeBrincat was showing up night in and night out. Him and Lucas Raymond especially have been always there for the Red Wings, producing, doing exactly what he was signed to do.
Yeah, and given that we're at almost exactly the halfway point of the season just passed, it makes projections and pace really easy to figure out. DeBrincat has a chance to hit 40 this year. He's creeping up on 20 goals. He's like 30 seems like a foregone conclusion. Knock on wood. I know how the jinx works, but it's what we were hoping to see last year. And sure, you can give him a bit of a break because first year with a new team, maybe he was feeling some things out, but man, he's shooting. Like, we always tell shoot or shoot, and high and wide seemed to be his theme for him, but whatever he did, he's got it dialed in, and he has not looked off many shots lately, which is exactly what you want someone like him to be doing.
Helps when he plays with a guy like Patrick Kane, who's not typically a shooter. It gives him more a defined role. If Patrick Kane is going to be on the ice with you, you are the trigger man. He's going to find you in space. You just have to put it on net and it will go in. And that's what's been happening for him. It's been awesome to see.
He's not gripping the stick like he was last year. Like, when he really got in that hole last year where felt like he was shooting high and wide, and then he was shooting low and wide and was just kind of looking off shots. Like, he was just getting in his own head because he knew he had the talent, and that happens to shooters. There's not a shooter in the league except for maybe Alex Ovechkin, who you haven't seen that happen to. And he broke out of that in a way where he's not galaxy braining it. He's just playing his game and making the simple plays based on his ability, which is through the roof. Even when Detroit's struggled with scoring, their best players have been typically their best players. And Alex DeBrincat is in that group in my mind. That's Detroit's win. They move on. That's 6 straight wins. And honestly, after 6 straight wins, nobody could have blamed the Red Wings for dropping one, even if it was considered a softball. Some people thought the Blackhawks were a trap game. Some people thought that was a game where, 5's plenty. You're going to drop one eventually. So if you looked at the Seattle game and you're like, there is no way they make it 7, I couldn't have blamed anyone. Like, that's just, the streak's going to end eventually. And Detroit comes in against Seattle, and before you can even sit down with your drink and your snack, they are up 4-0. 7 minutes and 53 seconds into the first period, they are up 4-0. They chased Grubauer, who had, I think, the league's worst goals against average.
Whoops.
Yeah. Coming into the game, it was a clinic for the first, half of the game, where Detroit ended up actually with the 6-0 lead. They ended up winning 6-2. They would have had every excuse to say, we're gassed. We were due for an off night, 6 straight wins for a team that's well outside of the wild card race at the start of it. But they came out guns a-blazing like they didn't miss a beat today.
Again, I feel it's important to point out certain things when stuff like this happens, because how many times have we seen a team put up a bunch of quick goals consecutively, and it's like they rim it around the boards, it hits a stanchion, pops it out in front, someone taps it in, or it's a crappy rebound, or a goalie whiffs on one from the point. These were 4 sick goals. Like, cycle around, find Larkin in the high slot, he rips a 1T, banks off Kasper and in, although I think it probably would have went in anyway. You've got that just filthy tip from Compher off a great feed from Tarasenko, a bomb from DeBrincat, like we were just talking about, and Gustafsson giving Kane an absolutely perfect backdoor tap in. Like, those are goal scorers' goals. Those are manufactured goals. Not one of them could you look at and go, oh, they got lucky there. No, every one of them was earned. They were absolutely bodying Seattle in the first 10 minutes of that game.
The fact that we're watching the Red Wings play other teams, and I'm not thinking, like when Detroit played Boston a little while back, and I thought, oh man, both these teams really suck. Like this is a tough year for both of them. I was messaging my Bruins fan friends and being like, welcome to the show, bud. You guys are in a bad place. And now, like, we're watching the Seattle Kraken and going, oh man, the Seattle Kraken suck. Detroit might get back there. Like, they're on a power play heater, and we're going to talk about that. But it's nice when Detroit's soft part of the schedule is actually something that they capitalize on. Something we were saying a lot last season is, you play the bad teams on your schedule, but the teams who are good and the teams who make the playoffs are the ones who actually take advantage of that part of the schedule. A soft schedule is only soft if you actually take advantage of it. Otherwise, you're probably part of another team's soft schedule. So Detroit coming in and starting like that was really important because they didn't miss a step. To recap quickly, like Brad said, Dylan Larkin's shot makes it through. The goal ends up being changed to Marco Kasper from Larkin and Raymond. For a second there, that was an assist from Johansson, which gave him his first multi-point game, which is a bummer, but still good for Kasper to again get on the board and get another goal. I believe that was his first 5-on-5 goal as well. JT Compher with a beautiful redirect off of Vladimir Tarasenko's shot to make it 2-0. Alex DeBrincat on the power play from Raymond and Seider to make it 3-0. And then Patrick Kane from Erik Gustafsson, who just phenomenal. The little stretch of games for him here.
Listen, I know there's a really good case for Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar for either one of them to win the Norris. They probably win. I'm just saying there's a conversation that might need to be had here about Erik Gustafsson if this keeps up.
Like, that was...
The exorcism was a success.
Whatever they did, man, whatever incantations they put forward, Erik Gustafsson is stepping forward into the ozone with so much confidence, where if you showed us that clip when we were talking about Gustafsson in August, September, it would be like, oh yeah, that's what the Red Wings signed Erik Gustafsson for. Surely he's been doing this since October. Not complaining. This is great now. That is 4 goals for the Red Wings to start the first period. In there, you almost missed Mo Seider with a massive reverse hit, patented Mo Seider reverse hit on Cartier, I believe it was. You head to the second period, and Detroit did not slow down at all. They opened the second period with a power play goal, this time from our own personal Norris candidate campaign, Erik Gustafsson. Assist to Tarasenko and Kasper, so Kasper ends up the game with a goal and an assist. And then Detroit's 6th goal is Dylan Larkin on the power play. What we thought at the time was his 2nd goal, but his 6th goal in 6 games, I believe it is, from Patrick Kane and Mo Seider. And that was Patrick Kane just showing off that play. Hold, silky little saucer pass, kind of behind where everyone is expecting to send it. Dylan Larkin moves the stick back, fires it home, points to Kane. Like, that was just filthy.
Again, it's a run hot when.
The game ends up 6-2, and Detroit gets 7 straight on the board. That's 7-0 since McLellan said in practice, play F in hockey. It's 7-1 in the McLellan era. This game has a lot of indications of where Detroit's truly at as a team, because 3 power play goals, like that's what's turbocharging this offense right now. Like the power play is beyond hot. It's nuclear at the moment. And if you look at their 5-on-5 metrics, sure, it's not the best, but still, in terms of how the team is gelling and executing, you watch, like, it's as simple as they weren't firing passes tape to tape previous to McLellan. Like, they look disjointed. Dylan Larkin talked a lot about, the forwards aren't doing the same thing as the defense and the wingers aren't doing the same thing as the center. They look connected. They look like they have a plan, and they look like they're executing it. And you're seeing dynamic elements to the game, like the defense stepping in, like how Johansson did and how Erik Gustafsson has now a couple times. It genuinely looks like a new team. 7 straight wins is what they're rewarded for.
There's a lot of things that aren't sustainable about what they're doing, but there are some very key changes that are sustainable. And, the theme, we'll call it, all season with this team was, you knew whatever first line they put together was probably going to do pretty good, and then it fell off a cliff. And playing Seider with Edvinsson, you knew they were elite, but then it fell off a cliff, which means best case scenario, 35 to 40 minutes a game, you are drowning and you are just trying to keep your head above water. Seider Schrott is working. Lately, Edvinsson and Johansson is working. There's 45 plus minutes of a game where you are getting sound defensive play, which has not happened at any point this season. The resurgence of DeBrincat and Kane now gives you a legit second line. Andrew Kopp's not exactly thriving there, but he is not doing anything to slow them down, which is exactly all you can ask from him in that role. Veleno did an admirable job on the top line while he was there, but Kasper seems to be doing it a bit better. So now all of a sudden you've got a sustainable 2 lines. Again, the bottom 6 forwards are not doing much in these 7 games. Yeah, they're not getting caved, and is that sustainable? Again, probably not. But all of a sudden you have basically another 15 to 20 minutes in a game where you can reasonably expect to keep up, which is not something they had all season.
Today's game was the first time the Red Wings were outshot in the McLellan era. The shots were 33-23, and when I said that pre-show, you very rightly said, Brad, that's score effect more than anything else in there. Like, Detroit was up 4-0 before you could blink, so of course Seattle, the game's going to be tilted in their favor.
Yeah, their game plan at that point is we need to get everything on net. Like, we're down 4 goals. They don't have the luxury to not shoot the puck.
Yeah, and Detroit by the end was just chewing clock. They wanted to get out of the game healthy and without, any disastrous mistakes. So really you look at the power play goals, like you said, Brad, all those things where you can't bank on those run outs all season long. That's fine. That's well and good. But there's aspects to the Red Wings that are just clicking in a way where you'd want to see that for a team that's truly competing for a wild card at least. And that's what I think Detroit's been doing since the holiday break came back there, and that aligns with McLellan.
I think the big one as well is the attitude has changed with this team. You don't see the 1,000-yard stares anymore. You actually see some players enjoying their time at the rink and their effort. The effort has been there every single game. Todd McLellan has been the head coach of this team, and the results are following. Obviously, they're all building upon each other, and there's been some good luck along the way, but those are the things that they can control, and they've been doing an excellent job with them.
We're going to talk about the playoff race and what's actually reasonable to expect from the Red Wings after the break. But before that, the schedule ahead is interesting. We have one game before next episode. That's the last home game of this little 4-game homestand. It's against the San Jose Sharks. So again, another very soft opponent. And there's no guarantees. Detroit has to come out with a good effort. They've not been guaranteed results against the Sharks in the past, to say the least. But then after that, they have this road trip we've been talking about. It's Florida, then Tampa Bay, then Dallas, then Philly. And then when they get back, it's Montreal, who's been red hot as well. The Tampa Bay Lightning again, and the LA Kings at home. Detroit has it's going to be an interesting way to see how they respond. The streak's not going to go forever. It's not going to go for the rest of the month. It's not even guaranteed to go another game. The results are great, and they've earned them. There've not been any, Cam Talbot stole this game like early in the season. But it'll fall short at some point. That's just the NHL. It's a long season. But how they acquit themselves over the rest of January, to me, is going to indicate a lot of what's actually reasonable for fans and us to expect with this team throughout the rest of the season.
Well, I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect they never lose again.
Whenever you have a chance to put in a Shoresy quote, you simply have to do it.
You absolutely have to do it. And that's about one of the only ones I can say, since this is a family show. So you really have to capitalize when you can.
Is it a family show?
I was not aware that it was a family show.
If it was not a family show, actually, then you would have changed into your Play F and Hockey shirt on air like you promised us.
I suppose that is true.
Yeah. And donations aren't high enough yet, I guess.
If it's not a family show, I have wasted so many perfect opportunities for a well-timed F-bomb to emphasize a point. I'm going to feel ripped off if this isn't a family show.
Well, that's what the overtime bonus episodes are for. Very jarring for people, by the way.
And anybody who hasn't listened to those before, the reactions are always the same. They're like, it's a combination of, wow, that was really funny, and what is wrong with you guys?
Anyways, that's what Detroit has coming up. We'll see how long the streak goes. Are they going to touch the franchise record? We don't know, but It's going to be interesting. Okay, more on the Red Wings after this, but first a word from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. In the interest of enjoying things while they last, like you said, Brad, at the start of the show, Detroit by points percentage right now is technically in a wild card spot. It's not actually what the standings are showing, and as we're recording, the Ottawa Senators are up 3-1 in the third, and Pittsburgh's tied 2-2. So this will all change probably by the time you listen. But through 42 games, Detroit is 20-18-4. So depending on how you count 500, they're above 500, at least in points percentage. And even if you just count it wins and losses, they're pretty close to it. And as of this very moment we're recording, they are the first team outside of a wild card spot, 1 game in hand on the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are 2 points ahead, and 3 games in hand on the Boston Bruins, who are 3 points ahead. We were talking about Detroit being next to last in the East not long ago.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, Columbus isn't the team the Red Wings have on points percentage right now. It's Boston that they would technically knock out on that percentage.
Detroit has, with one very, very, very long win streak, turned around a lot of their opportunities, avenues, paths forward ahead for the rest of the season. If they went on a 3-game heater or went like 5-2 or just were just generally very good over a stretch, that might have done something for them, but not to the tune of 7 straight wins, and it opens doors again. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Detroit is guaranteed to make the playoffs or all their roster problems are solved or, these players are going to be playing like this the rest of the season. But now if you're Steve Yzerman, if you're Todd McLellan, if you're Dylan Larkin leading the Detroit Red Wings, you're saying, yeah, the wild card spot is not off the board. What's the cutoff projected at right now? Like 87 points or something stupid like that?
It's pitiful, but that's an opportunity.
Yeah. So I think part of this is reframing the way we think of a playoff team, because last year it was like one team is getting in where no matter what, that team, which was Washington, they're going to stink, and they got in. But I think we have to look at this and say, this is just the East this season. Pretty much anyone outside of the top teams are all going through some version of what Detroit's going through. So they're not much different. They're very much not different than Boston this year. They're not much different than Columbus this year. They're not much different than Montreal or Pittsburgh. There's no reason why Detroit, whether it feels good or not, should be out of this, and they're not.
They're very much in this. Again, if you're talking percentage of likelihood, they're still in the camp of they're more likely to miss than they are to make it. But it's worth mentioning, 2 weeks ago, I was starting to form some pretty strong opinions on Hagens versus Misa versus Martone. I could care less to watch any of their highlights right now because, now I'm standings watching. I'm paying attention to what's happening between Ottawa and Dallas and Pittsburgh and Tampa right now because it matters. And I understand a 7-game win streak is not going to happen again this season in all likelihood. But like you alluded to, the playoff cutoff this year, based on projections of everybody's pace in the race, is pitiful. So Detroit can be a mediocre team this year and get into the playoffs.
It sounds exactly like the conversation we had last year. It's like this team just needs to be average to make the playoffs, and then they lost on a tiebreaker. So I am definitely not going to hitch my wagon to either of the horses right now.
So what he's saying is they need to be a little better than average. 1 point better than average.
Exactly. And I said last episode, as long as the team is entertaining, whatever the outcome is, I'm fine with it, because that ultimately that's what we're looking for, right? Like, we just cannot see the apathy and the dead team that we saw middle December and before.
I think a large part of that is going to depend on a couple of things. The obvious statement here is you don't see a cave in with the goaltending. And right now, we talked about this last episode, Detroit kind of has an embarrassment of riches in goaltending. They have Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon, who, depending on health, have varying amounts of high levels of performance, or at least sufficient levels of performance. And that's a step down from what we saw at the start of the season. Like, if we've already seen the best from Cam Talbot that we've seen this season, which was essentially carrying Detroit to the start of the year, that's fine, because they don't need him to be, godlike every game. Between him and Lyon, that's great. You have Husso doing well down with Grand Rapids, obviously with the emergency call-up and things. That'll change depending on Lyon's health. And then we've talked a lot in the pipeline, but you have Kosa as an option this year if you get that far down. If you're getting down to Kosa, then something's gone wrong in terms of health of goalies this season. All that aside, you don't need all-star goaltending, especially if the defensive pairs hold up the way Brad was talking about, and we're going to get to that in a second. And the power play is really, really boosting this team. And that is concerning because power plays, even the hottest power plays in the NHL, they don't stay hot forever. And so if the power play cools down, it has to come with increased 5-on-5 scoring. Detroit's best players have been their best players this year, but you'd hope from some more depth scoring. Maybe Marco Kasper is a part of that. Maybe Joe Veleno is a part of that. But that's the kind of thing that you're looking out for. If Detroit's going to do this and you're going to give Evan a wagon to hitch to, those two things I'm looking at outside of the defense.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the first thing you were talking about there with the goaltending, because earlier in the episode we talked about sustainability. Over this 7-game win streak, how many would you say the goalies have stolen?
Not
Zero.
Yeah, based on what we saw at the start of the year, nothing relative to that.
Zero, which is a positive sign. I don't think they've been bad over this run, but I don't think they've been anything special. They've been okay to good. The Red Wings are winning.
They even had a bad game against Chicago.
Yeah, like the Red Wings are winning not because of their goalies. So it leads you to believe there's a possibility that when the power play regresses, which it's definitely going to regress, they're operating at whatever the unsustainable clip is, they're about 40% over that. But when that regresses, you might see that's when the goalies start heating up, because we saw it earlier from them in the year where they were unreal to start the season. And yeah, they haven't been bad, but they haven't been stealing games like they did when the Red Wings were playing like crap. So if all of a sudden they hit a bit of aggression, but the goalies wake up, could be a bit of an offset there, which could be pretty critical, again, if you think the Wings can actually make a run of this.
And part of this, too, is, we talk about power play. Special teams also encapsulates the penalty kill, which has shown some improvement as well, and you hope that is going to continue to improve. It's not been as meteoric, but you're seeing some things that are doing a little bit better there. So maybe if the power play cools down, the penalty kill heats up, and that kind of offsets it a little bit. So all of that is what you're paying attention to. But the biggest thing in my mind, and this is not just for the immediate future, this is for the rest of the season, is if what we're seeing from Johansson and Gustafsson, and they're two very different cases, and we'll talk about why, but if this is sustainable, what we're seeing from them, and Todd McLellan and Trent Yawney and the Red Wings have unlocked something in those guys, that changes the trajectory of the season in my mind, because you no longer have a black hole behind Seider and Edvinsson in terms of who your best defensemen are. You have actual deployable top four. You have actual deployable three pairs. You have an option where you're not starting every single, face off in your zone, or every single Seider shift has to be in some kind of recovery to get the puck out. Like the cascade effect of how it positively impacts the team, if you have options on defense, is insane. And the guys don't even have to be out of this world. They don't, like, all jokes aside, they don't have to be Norris candidates. They just have to be a serviceable number 4 guy. They have to be a serviceable number 5 guy. That's all you need from them. And we've seen that from them.
And it's probably fair to point out that since they've assembled the defense as they are now, they haven't seen the McDavids, Matthews, Jack Hugheses of the world yet. So that could change the outlook pretty dramatically. But again, to counter my own point, earlier in the season, mediocre first lines like that of Seattle and Chicago were still caving the bottom 4 defense in Detroit when given the chance. So it is still a step in the right direction. And again, theme of the day is sustainability. Do I think Albert Johansson is an absolute lock to save the second pair with Edvinsson? No, of course not. He's a rookie. And he's a late second-round pick rookie. Expectations need to be adjusted as such. But if it's passable, I don't even need to say good. If he can be passable in this role, it's a giant upgrade from what they were getting. It's a huge boon to the future, because now all of a sudden you're looking at the future going, oh, we got to keep Johansson penciled in on this roster. He's not a stopgap. And Now you're getting, again, 40 to 45 passable minutes at worst, which is 20 to 25 more than they were getting the rest of the season. And yeah, I don't think anybody has any illusions about what Erik Gustafsson's going to do defensively this season, even at his best. But if he can go out there and put up a half a point per game on the power play, great. That's all we're asking from him is don't give them directly the puck in front of your net at 5-on-5 and then be competent on the power play. And we're thrilled with that as a bottom pair D. Again, whether that's Petrie, Hall, whoever opposite him, sure. But it does completely change the dynamic of what the Red Wings can do, especially up against a McDavid, Matthews, Jack Hughes, because you throw Seider, Schrott out there. If they can hold that, Johansson's still not getting the toughest matchups.
Well, we'll find out Thursday when they're on the road in Florida, because they won't be getting optimal matchups. They're going to be fed to the Wolves a little bit. And if they swim, then yeah.
They're rewarded with Tampa Bay the next game.
Then you have to play Tampa Bay. So we're going to get some sample sizes to see if these guys have really unlocked something of their game under Todd McLellan or not.
I love how you used throw them to the Wolves when you're talking about a team who's a literal panther.
Yeah. Throw them to the Panthers.
Or did you mean mountain lion? Or did you mean cougar? Or did
I'm not quite sure what the phrase is anymore.
With Gustafsson, it's a case of this is what the Red Wings thought he was. And he's not, a rookie like Johansson. Like, he really had a terrible start to the year. And as Brad said, it's not like he's going to become a stalwart defensively, but you see him with the confidence to come in and add a dynamic element offensively, whether it's on the power play or otherwise. And that is huge for Detroit, one, because they lost that in Shane Gostisbehere when he went to Carolina in free agency, but also because if they don't have depth scoring reliably this year, you have to get it from somewhere else. And for that to come from the blue line is a massive return to the kind of success they saw from last season. And as you also said, Brad, with Johansson, he's a rookie. He's a rookie, and whether this is because of McLellan or because of the opportunity with Edvinsson or because of the primo matchups he's been getting in terms of them not being too hard, probably a combination of those things. But this is the kind of progression that you want to see from a rookie defenseman who's not an all-star like Seider or Edvinsson. But it's not guaranteed. Like, these are the steps that you aren't always guaranteed to see from a rookie defenseman. If you want an example, look at pretty much any other rookie defenseman that wasn't a star on Detroit for the last history of this podcast. It's not guaranteed with Johansson even now, but these are the comfortability and him easing into the lineup and really just kind of relaxing and playing his game and embracing playing with a player like Edvinsson is huge. I want to see that pairing go for as long as you can possibly hold it together. And it might fall apart because he's a rookie or because of injury or because of anything else, and you don't panic because of that. But I really didn't think we'd see either of these storylines this season, let alone both of them. So that's massive for Detroit. More from Detroit, this time in the world of trades. Got some questions regarding the whole Dylan Cozens thing and whether it was completely fizzled out, and not really a huge update here, but I also don't think it's gone. I think Buffalo is still in this. They're still scouting the Red Wings. They're still sending some big names to Red Wings games to watch. And what they would have seen over the past couple of games and all this time they've been scouting Detroit, this stretch here has to be impressive. And if you're Steve Yzerman, you have leverage. And my question to you two, and this is something that's been mentioned a couple of times, is if you're Yzerman, do you stand pat or do you make a move if an opportunity comes up, whether it's Cozens or anyone else?
You make the move. The winning streak's great. The potential playoff run here is great. It doesn't matter in terms of this trade because you only make this trade with your long-term view in mind. Now, I could justify it with a couple reasons for this year. Obviously, it would help with a playoff push, but that's not why you're doing it. If you bring in a Cozens, a Miller, a Petterson, whoever's out there, you're rewarding the room for, hey, we believe in you guys. We're going to give you some help. Like, let's get going. Like, if you're Dylan Larkin, and to go on the most extreme example, you're looking at that roster sheet after a trade going, that's Elias Petterson coming out behind me. We're probably going to win tonight. That would feel pretty good. And huge, like straight up reward to the team for getting to this point.
Something that is said a lot on this show is that teams who succeed are the ones who are brave enough to make the bold moves even when they're unpopular or even when it's not, it's a little bit in the gray area. Think about Vegas upgrading their coach when they were perfectly happy with the one they had, making a trade when their team was already considered stacked. You don't stop pressing your foot on the gas. And I think any GM in the league would be aware enough to think, yeah, this isn't going to last forever. And how do you bolster this team? And it's about rewarding the team too. Like GMs always talk about like this team gave it their all and they drag themselves into contention against all odds, and you have to reward them with a move at the deadline. And it's not always popular with fans because they're like, what are you doing? You should be tanking, et cetera, et cetera. We've probably said something like that. But for the guys in the room, that's how you not only sustain morale, you boost it further.
Yeah, at the end of the day, these are people we're dealing with, right? There's emotion involved in it. And if the team feels like they've been playing well and they're making a push, and now is the time to add someone who's not a pending UFA to help now and for the future, I think you do it, right? Like, we say the same thing when teams trade away guys, and then all of a sudden, well, I mean, look no further than the New York Rangers. They trade away their captain, and now the room has completely been torn apart, and the season's basically a wash at this point. So happens both ways, but yeah, if it's a move that helps this team long term, but also in the short term, why not?
The Rangers should definitely keep selling at this point. I think K'Andre Miller would look great in red and white.
Yeah,
Agreed.
That's the Miller you were talking about.
Oh no, we're gonna get both Millers. That's what's gonna happen. It's just we're gonna pull Ryan Miller out of retirement. It's just we're not gonna be Miller's light. We're gonna be Miller's heavy.
Jeez, Brad. It's funny. You're like the Rangers. Their season's a wash. They're at 42 points in 42 games. Detroit's at 44 points in 42 games. Perspective is everything.
But
man.
What are the vibes, Ryan?
That's what I'm telling you. It's what it's all about. You can look at the stats. You can even watch the game. You could be a nerd for either one. What are the vibes like? That's who should make the playoffs.
Agreed.
I'll wait for the NHL news portion to talk about Columbus because I think they deserve some love. So that's the Red Wings update with Cozens, and we went out and asked what would you give up for Cozens, and a lot of the same things came up. We also posted and asked what people would give up for Petterson, and I think you're seeing some interesting divides in terms of where people draw the line. And I also have untouchables. Like, I don't think you need to make moves with Seider or Raymond or Edvinsson, like those guys in your mind right now. But some people's untouchable lists went extremely long. And I'm fully willing to admit, like, this isn't going to be a unanimous way of thinking, because some people think, oh, if a guy will get you 100 points but won't show up in the playoffs, don't get him now. But for me, that's cart before the horse thinking. Like, let's add the superstar now is the way I'm thinking about it. And if you can get a guy like Petterson or Marner or Rantanen or whatever else, like, yeah, you're still going to have holes in your lineup, and it's going to cost you. They're going to take their pound of flesh if you want that guy.
Only one team wins the Stanley Cup every year. One team. That's 25 guys win the Stanley Cup every year.
And that team that wins the Stanley Cup never gets there by keeping all their good pieces and taking other teams' good pieces. Like, it's a give and take. And again, going back to a couple minutes ago, you got to make bold moves.
I think for Petterson specifically, the Eichel trade's a perfect example. Eichel did have the neck injury, which was a big question mark, which obviously brought the value down a little bit. But I think you could argue Pettersson's mental fragility could be the same drawback in terms of a question mark that keeps the value from going super sky high. I did notice that in all the many Twitter arguments I saw about untouchables in this trade, I think people forgot how big of a prospect Peyton Krebs was at the time.
He was considered top notch.
Yeah, he absolutely did not pan out to that, but at the time of the trade, he was not a throw-in. He was a significant part of the deal.
Something I'll add in there very quickly is Buffalo gunned for him for a long time, and Vegas did a good job protecting Krebs and inflating that value. Like, they played that extremely well, but I agree. He was a top-tier prospect.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about untouchables for a player of Elias Pettersson's capacity, that's a very short list. Obviously, you have your Larkin, Seider, Raymond, Edvinsson. Fine. I think everybody else on the roster is in play. For prospects, man, is there one? Like, is there a single one? I could argue maybe for Sandin Pellikka, just because they don't have another alternative anywhere in the pipeline that would fill that role and do it at as high a level as he possibly could. Because even Kasper and Danielson, yeah, center prospects are extremely valuable. You're acquiring a center.
Yeah.
So Kosa to 99% of teams would be untouchable, I would argue, in a scenario like this. The Red Wings have Augustine. They have a fallback. So my list of untouchables for a player of Pettersson's caliber is extremely short. Cozens isn't Petterson. You can maybe throw in a couple other names there just because, again, it's a value thing.
Yeah.
But man, Vegas gave up almost all of their top prospects to get a lot of top-end talent. Pietrangelo, Eichel, so on and so forth, and it's worked for them. Not all were trades, some were free agents, I know that. But still, they sold the farm, and they won a Stanley Cup.
And Vegas was closer than Detroit could even dream of being right now. To put that fairly,
Vegas has never been far away.
No, they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They handled the expansion draft extremely well, which is more than Seattle can say.
Still don't understand that at all for Seattle. But either way, the point being, you want a superstar? You're probably not drafting one, and they probably don't have one in the pipeline right now.
Teams are always talking to other teams. It's not like, oh, just right now, Steve Yzerman is talking to teams because he thinks he can add to this version of the Red Wings. GMs are talking to other GMs all the time. If we reported on every time we had an indication that the Red Wings were talking to X team about X player, it would be meaningless by the end because 99% of it turns into nothing. But
I was going to say, if I was an NHL GM, I'd have a day circled on my calendar every year where I just call the 31 other teams. Edmonton, McDavid? No? All right, have a good one. We'll talk to you next year. Toronto? Matthews? Nope, it was great talking to you. And then someone's like, well.
I can't remember what two NFL execs it was, but they were friends from when they worked in the same organization previously. And every year at the draft, one would call call the other when he was expecting a phone call.
When their pick came up on the clock, he would call them every time.
It's that kind of thing. I wouldn't want to be that kind of GM. I wouldn't last long in the league, but that's what I'd want to do.
100%.
If we want Steve Yzerman to do something to, get the superstar that Detroit wasn't gifted in the draft lottery like other teams, then that's what you're talking about, a very short untouchable list. But again, it's a different school of thought and it's not the only answer. So those of you who are saying, no, you also need to protect, X, Y, and Z, you probably have good reason and it's probably a strong argument. We'll see how this shakes out, but I wonder. Okay, let's jump into some NHL news here. I can't start with anything else other than Nikita Zadorov.
Because the entire hockey internet verse kept receipts on this.
Which, as a Red Wings fan, you love to see. And we've been very complimentary of Zadorov in the past. We put him on the, all NHL, all-time guys team before. He's a dude. But he had that thing with Lucas Raymond where he wasn't a fan of Raymond apparently selling a slashing call. He said, it's a man's league. We all get slashed. We're all in pain. But you don't shake your hand and show the referee that you get slashed. So I think it's a little bit disrespectful. So I went after him. You don't sell penalties. Yeah, anyways, Luosterainen ends up in the box for Florida when Zadorov shakes his hand very theatrically.
That hand was over his head for a long time.
It was over the glass. It was that high.
I will put $20 on the table for whatever reporter shows him the video and asks him what the hell.
They'll need a riot shield in front of them. You're not going to not get a quote from Zadorov. The guy likes to chat, and that's what makes him entertaining. And it's said a lot, you can't ask NHL players to have some more personality than get mad at. I love this. I think it's hilarious. It's embarrassing for Zadorov right now, and you knew it was stupid the moment he said it about Raymond. And if you've been slashed in the right part of your hand or your wrist, that hurts.
Sorry for doing a natural reaction.
Yeah.
There's so many dead zones in your hand and wrist where you get whacked, and it's tingly. It's like getting hit in the funny bone.
Didn't you come over the other day and say your elbow or your hand is feeling better because you can't feel it right now or something? What was that?
No, I've got all the nerve issues in my shoulder when it exploded years ago, so my hand just goes numb.
Remember when Brad was like, I haven't been able to feel my hand for 2 weeks?
We had to tell him to go see a doctor.
That's definitely not normal.
Yeah, I didn't go, and it got better. So we're fine. Don't do as I do, people listening. Definitely go to the doctor. I'm just stupid and don't have time.
Anyways, that was funny. In the interest of dunking on people, and I know I'm dunking on one of the best teams in the league and, one of the powerhouses of the East, but what was the combined plus minus of that?
It was -6, right?
It was minus 17 total for Matthews, Marner, and Nyes in their recent game. It was a -17 rating. It was the first line with a combined -17 rating in an NHL game since Danny Heatley, Ilya Kovalchuk, and Patrick Stefan for the Thrashers.
That's the type of line that I would expect that stat to come from.
That
in 2003.
That is a pull. 3 defensive stalwarts. So I got to tell you, I'm surprised.
Credit to Sportsnet stats for that one. But that was, look, Toronto is doing their usual. They're making a lot of people question whether this is the year that they actually do something interesting. And I love this part of the year. I think it's fantastic because this is the kind of buildup you need for the meltdown that comes in the playoffs, which is how you get guys like Marner to leave the Leafs.
Just, you want to go wild with theories? The Leafs finish first in the Atlantic as they're slated to do right now. Once again, the pressure like this starts mounting, and the voices get louder and louder. And then they get upset by the plucky 8th seed in the first round of the playoffs, who just happened to be the Detroit Red Wings. And Mitch Marner's looking across that ice, watching them celebrate, going, that's where I want to be. And then July 1st rolls around. Some problems solve themselves.
If Detroit makes it, like in some fantasy world where Detroit makes it, they're absolutely positioned to be last year's Capitals, where like even one win would be a miracle. Like it would be, they'd be poised to be swept based on how the East is shaking out this year. So even one win would be, shame on you for losing to the Detroit Red Wings in the playoffs. It's a no-lose situation for the Red Wings and the fans.
It is, and there's a lot to lose for the Leafs, which makes these cracks in the bedrock that much funnier to watch them form.
You know what? I think if you win one game against the Leafs in the playoffs, you win at least 2, because if you beat them once, that seed of doubt has been planted, and every single spring it happens. So I would imagine you get at least 2.
Then you get the 6th man on your side, which is all of the Leafs in their own head.
Yes.
And then you get the 7th man, which is every other fan base in the league hopping on your bandwagon to watch the Leafs collapse again.
Cracks in the bedrock, the Boston Bruins.
Oh, jeez.
You thought Petterson Miller was an issue. For like 3 hours, apparently it was reported, I don't have all the details, but it was reported that it was Marchand Pasternak was an issue. And then Marchand came out, and again, in the interest of like let guys have personalities, Marchand fired back hard and like was like, that guy was making it up. Like, it's a shame that he has a job. Like, he fired back hard.
Love it.
And good. He should. He handled it how Vancouver should have handled it.
Vancouver handled it like a team that absolutely was having the issues that was advertised. I don't know if Boston is. Like, I don't know. I don't pretend to know where that came from, but whether it's true or not, Marchand handled it exactly the right way.
Vancouver handled it like, oh, we're planning on trading one of these guys, so we want people to not be mad at us when we do. Boston wanted to squash it immediately. It could be true. It could absolutely be true. And you still go out and do exactly what Marchand did. Like 100 out of 100 times.
You know me. I'm always scared to predict Boston's downfall. But watching them this year is like, unless they make some kind of move and they're the team to get Petterson or Miller or something, then I don't know. They're not trending in the right direction. Next year, Jeremy Swayman will be back, and that'll change things. But
again, in the theme of things that are unsustainable, but we got to laugh at them when they happen, travel back to Christmas Eve. And I tell you, oh, by the way, the date is January 12th. The Detroit Red Wings just passed the Boston Bruins on points percentage. How would you think Boston's season's going?
Yeah, that's a great, the Detroit litmus test Red Wings. And then final note here, Alex Ovechkin joins none other than Gordie Howe as the only other player in NHL history with 20 consecutive 20-plus goal seasons.
Actually break that stat. It's insane. There's a lockout in there. There's a partial season in that streak.
It's crazy Gretzky didn't do that. Gretzky was putting up 300-point seasons.
Ovi's he's the greatest goal scorer of all time.
I think Gretzky hit a point towards the end of his career where he's like, I'm not shooting a puck anymore, and just rattled off like 70 assist seasons.
Casually.
just for fun. Like, even it's easy to forget. And I want to say it was his last season. He was damn near a point per game, if not over. And I think he scored like 9 goals that year.
He's one of those guys where, like, if for some reason he played 5 more years, which he needed to retire, like the poor guy was tired, but the amount of points he would still be putting up would be ridiculous. Anyways, let's jump into the final segment here on the Winged Wheel podcast after this break.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. If you want to support the show and join the Dub Club, you get access to benefits like our Patreon exclusive bonus overtime episodes, which, like we said earlier in this episode, record right after this main one. We let loose, have fun. It's a little bit of a different tone, but it's a good time. And sometimes I started off with bloopers from the episode as well. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. In addition to that, you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, we give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast. Very quickly before we jump in, Hot Stove Stories Rounding the Bases featuring Mike Tirico and guests is sold out, but the online auction is still live for you. You have until Tuesday. Go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org to check it out. There are really, really, really great things to bid on in there. Signed Larkin jerseys, sticks, Grey Ghost dinners. There's golf experiences, all of that and more. Go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org. It supports a great cause. All right, let's take questions from our Patreon supporters. Sam Migliaccio says, does Kasper finish the year at the wing? If he does and finds success next year, would the Wings try him at center again or leave him on a wing on maybe the second line with DeBrincat?
It would depend entirely on what happens via trade and free agency. I think one of the big appeals of Marco Kasper as a player is you can play him where you need him.
And I think with a guy this young in his career and how the NHL values center, if he finds success on the wing, and even if he sticks there for a long time, it won't be the last time you see him at center. He'll be tried at center again. Think of how often Michael Rasmussen is tried at center.
That experiment should have died 4 years ago, and he's played center as recently as the last year. So,
and with players like that, it's not even if they thrive or they're at their best at center. Sometimes your team just needs a centerman that game, or they're trying to get different things going. So, yeah, if he has an opportunity to play center, they'll try him there. And you often see young players like him flip to the wing to try to find success and confidence earlier on. And they try him out when he's more matured and, they trust him more on faceoffs and defensive assignments and things like that. But yeah, it's not the last down the middle. You'll see him. Xander says, in the spirit of doing the opposite of prospect profiles, have you guys checked out on Luke Witkowski lately? He recently started playing with Skellefteå on the third line. He may not be able to fight over there, but he's laying some big hits already. He's been blowing guys up over there. It's hysterical to see.
I'm trying to think of the term. The closest way I can describe this is it's kind of like an invasive species. Nobody knows how to handle it, and it's just going poorly for everyone else.
Luke Witkowski is an all-time guy. Like, if there's a guy you can pluck from the past where you're like, not even because of your performance, but just in terms of vibes, you deserve to be on a more successful version of the Red Wings, he'd be near the top of the list for me.
All-team guy.
Cletus says, as of the end of the second period, Tarasenko sits at a measly 4 goals this season at $4.75 million. Only Kasper, Mott, and Fisher have fewer goals among forwards, and all combined get paid about half of what he does. Oof. How does Steve send his contract straight into the sun this offseason?
You would have to give up a sweetener to unload it or buy him out.
Yeah, that one is of anyone who has been doing extremely well. And he, like, for multiple assists and things like that, it's not really coming in such a way where he's stepping up and dominating his line or dominating the game. He still hasn't really gotten going the way the Red Wings have hoped he would. Rose says, has McLellan started his system of doing things, or is this just Newsy's system but executed better? I'm not sure what to make of this run hot.
It's probably been tweaked, might be the word. Again, it's hard to completely overhaul a system mid-season, but you can see minor changes, specifically on the penalty kill. They switched that up completely, but 5-on-5, it's different execution of the same basic plan.
I do see a lot of differing moments where I would call it significant, though. Like, getting them to embrace at points, for example, the 1-3-1 or really kind of understanding defensive structures or embracing breaks on off of turnovers or off the rush. Like that to me feels different.
The mentality is different. Just because they're playing a more possession-based game and they're being a little more aggressive in some areas and a little less aggressive in other areas, it's still out of the same base 1-2-2 for the most part. And you do see them fall into a 1-3-1 from time to time. But that's kind of how this is going to go with McLellan is he can't change everything at once. So he's going to change one thing. They're going to master it. Then he'll change another thing. And then all of a sudden, you look 5 months down the line and it's completely different. But it's like when, someone loses a significant amount of weight. If you see them every day, you don't notice the change. But if you look at January to April, it's completely different.
Also, the word system has completely lost its meaning. Like, what do you factor in there? If you really kind of coach guys to execute a lot better and focus a lot more on the first pass, is that part of the system? Or is it literally just where like F1, F2, F3 is kind of thing? So some people's eyes roll to the back of their head when they hear the word. Don't blame them either. The Angry Ginger also asks about Tarasenko. The common theme is, how do you get Tarasenko going? We'll see how the rest of the year goes.
Time machine?
Yeah. Don't sign the contract. Jiminy Frickett says, that's a good one. I know we're not, but is this what it feels like to be a contender? It's been so long, I've forgotten how it feels. I'll tell you, no. Because you know what contenders are doing? They are splitting hairs and worrying about their 7th defenseman and their backup goalie and their 12th forward kind of thing. Like the wins against the Chicagos and the Seattles and hopefully San Jose's, that's routine, not routine, expected for them.
They don't even have podcasts about those. They don't even do those game recaps in their podcast.
They're like, yeah, we won 5-3, move on.
Our first line only scored 3 goals. If we put this guy on that line, they might have had 4.
And depending on the market you're in, like if it's a Canadian market, then everything is a nuclear meltdown, even at the slightest inconvenience, like when I stub my toe. But even for, look at Tampa Bay. People were calling for Tampa Bay to be a tragically bad team because they kind of lost a little bit over the past couple of years. They're still one of the best teams in the Atlantic. That's what I feel. When you've lost perspective and you can't see the forest for the trees after like one small negative outcome, then you're a contender. My real question is, they have to be shopping one of their goalies, right? I believe so, but probably not to the scale you're thinking. I think the most likely outcome here is that they try to get something for Husso or Campbell. Doesn't really matter what, but mostly just to free up space down there. Aussie says, longtime listener, first-time Patreon subscriber. Welcome to the Dub Club. Thank you so much for your support. He says, my question is, how much is Brad going to spend on a Griffins Jurassic Park jersey this weekend?
Whatever it takes.
You're bidding against Evans, so...
No, he's going to probably get Danielson. I'll have to just kind of browse the 4th line.
You're going to have to browse the guys who are just up for a tryout kind of thing. Give Simon the Heart says, what are your expectations for Emmett Finney going forward? Expectations and hopes are different things, right? Like, I hope Emmett Finney can come in and, look at Amadeus Lombardi's path, for example. Can he emulate that at all? Expectations, I think the kid's already cleared them.
Oh, yeah, he's a 7th round pick. Let's be crystal clear. In any draft, the expectation of your 7th round pick is I hope he lives a long and healthy life. Like, there is no expectation of having any impact in the NHL at any point in their career. If it ever even crosses your mind as a possible outcome a year post-draft, it's a great pick.
And he's already, putting that in the conversation, because I really wouldn't be surprised to see Emmett Finney get games in the winged wheel.
He's been excellent.
And he has proven all doubters and all odds wrong the moment he was drafted moving forward. I do think he should have been in the conversation for Team Canada's World Junior team, and the odds are still stacked against him. I think he's well positioned to continue to keep proving people wrong, but so long as he has a reputation in the draft slot he has, that's what's going to be in front of him. So I'll go so far as to say I expect to see him get a shot in the winged wheel, whether it's a bunch of preseason games or 1 or 2 regular season games. And anything, if he reaches that, that's already monumental. And anything beyond that is gold. All right, last one here from Dylan Larkin's Nana says, at what point do people have to stop calling it the new coach bump and start saying that this is just the way things are now? I maintain, wait until they're back from this road trip plus a few games. See where you're at the end of January, and I think by then you can have a big enough sample and enough differing tests of differing strengths to make declarations. I say this as a guy who, with Brad, sat here and called for playoffs last February.
That's personal growth.
Yeah, personal fear. The scar runs deep. Okay, as I'm sure you can hear from my voice, this episode's been a little bit of a grind. Still fighting off whatever Evan and Brad had recently. So we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to be back with you on Wednesday after the Sharks game. This Saturday, we have Winged Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins. If you want to go, griffinshockey.com/WWP, jamiedanielsfoundation.org for the auction of all their fantastic items online. And if you want to support the Winged Wheel Podcast, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. And if you want to support the show, but Patreon's not for you, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and leave a rating. The thumbs up, the stars, write a review, all of that helps. Tell a friend about the show. Oh, and if you want the Play F and Hockey merch, go to wingedwheelpodcast.com/shop or go to the links in the description. Thank you all so very much to the sponsors of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Thank you. And to all of our patrons, you are the lifeblood of the show. We cannot do this without you. To our name level supporters on Patreon, thank you, thank you, thank you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Alexander Hansen, Sander Anderson, Ghost of OSBP, Glenn Brabham, Matthew M. Rice, Sea Lion, Adam Rose, Adam Zuiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Asher Killian, Beer League legend, Best James Bond, Brett Kokesh, brand new name level supporter. Welcome to the Dub Dub Club. Thank you so much for your support. Carl Brutina Nanaluski, Carl Provi, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, Cider, Dickens, formerly Marlon Winchester, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, GR Gurley, brand new name level supporter. Welcome to the Dub Dub Club. Thank you so much for your support, Grand Rapids Gurley. Griffin, God Creatives, Hatrick, Sandine Pelka, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, I Met Larkin once, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, aka Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kalen Wood, Croner's Left Knee, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi. Now I have to learn how to click on a Macintosh. R.A., Raptor Kitchen, Riley Enright, Robert Smith, Roy Donk, Robert Smith, brand new name level supporter. Welcome to the WW Club. Ryan Britt, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Steve the Liability, Stephen Ordeleb. Apparently I'm saying your name wrong. I'm sorry. Tell me how to say it, please. That's what I appreciate about you. Wallman's Elite Dancing D. What? Petamutt. Iserplan Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohannon, the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, AA Ron, AB, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, C.E. Hayes. Welcome to the WW Club. Brand new name level supporter. Chimkim Nutgits, Commander Ben Brown of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsukes Dangleberries, Deep In, Cider, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Josh Yelton, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Linda Hull, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raitmond, Mitch Minier, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Sam Migliaccio, Sandy P, Right Hand D, She Got a Big Chungus, so I call her Big Chungus, Steven, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Trent Thorough, Turkish Doctor, Returning Your Call. You're going to hear from me for that one. Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. Talk to you Wednesday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.